Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing good and your preparation is going on well. So welcome to Recitals in Depth by Vajiram and Ravi for the month of September, wherein we will cover the current affair articles across these broad themes essential for GS Paper 3, particularly Science and Tech section. The first theme is going to be a convergence between biology and chemistry. So we are going to read about biochemistry products that are developed and their application. In the second, we will read about the chemicals, specifically their associated disasters and their preventive measures. Then, we will uncover the newfound secrets of the space and also that of the Earth. Then, we will evaluate the performances and new innovations by space agencies like ISRO and also the contribution of women in space programs. So, for a detailed analysis, stay tuned. So, in the month of September, we came across a lot of good and innovative science and technology topics, and you'll be very happy to read on them. So let's proceed with the index first. So in the index, we'll see quite a few things, and not all of them will be equally important for the UPSC exam, so we'll be covering them in the considerable or proportionate details only, okay? Some of the important topics that we are reading. First of all, let me brief you about all of them. So first is a repurposed drug actually. Previously, this drug was used as antipyretic to lessen down the temperature of the body. But now it is used for industrial purposes because of its harmful impact. So it was a harmful chemical, a hazardous chemical, which has leaked from a Visakhapatnam power plant. That is the cause of worry. So we'll put up the entire theme of chemical disasters and their prevention status in India through this topic. In the second one, we will read about a kind of predatory relationship between two organisms, fungus, along with the carpenter ants, or also known as tarantulas. So, a kind of fungus grows into the body of ants and they cause their death, and therefore these are known as zombie fungus. Okay. Next is dedicated enzyme manufacturing facility. So what is the need of creating dedicated enzyme manufacturing facility? Also, this is the first time ever that in India such a facility has been created, where in Manesar, Haryana, and how is it going to impact and how is it going to put an impetus into our ethanol production? And then what is the importance of ethanol production in India? What are the benefits, challenges, government scheme related to that? Everything across length and breadth we are going to discuss. Then what is drug repurposing? Why is it advantageous, and how many drugs that we know have got repurposed? Okay. Then we will read about a very interesting discovery made by a project of NASA. So this is the discovery of a weak electric field, or the third field around the Earth. So the third energy field of the Earth has been discovered, which is known as polar wind. So we will go into the conceptual details of this topic. Then we will read what is quantum gravity, a very important topic from prelims point of view. What is quantum gravity, which comes at the coherence of the general relativity theory and the second one, which is quantum mechanics. So this kind of gravity follows both these separated dimensions of physics together. Then we will see how and what led to the creation of first legally binding AI treaty, who has been beyond it, and also who has been behind it, what all countries have participated and who are going to sign this AI treaty, and is India going to be a part of it or not? Okay. In the next one, we will read about Bepi Colombo has been in news. This is a joint venture between ESA, European Space Agency, and JAXA, which is Japan Space Agency. What it has recently done is to give the first ever clear picture of the south pole of Mercury, the first planet from our sun. So we'll be reading about this mission. Then a new manufacturing facility for production of silicon carbide has been set up. Where has it been set up? What are the applications? We are going to read. Then what is neuromorphic computing technology? So when we talk about the emerging technologies, this is one of a kind technology, which now our IISc, Indian Institute of Science, is also discovering, has also been taken into application by Neuralink, a company of Elon Musk. So how do we integrate, or how do we create machines which act just like human brains, is something that we are going to read in this new kind of emerging technology. In the next one, we are going to see what are the benefits of phosphoric acid, and because of its growing benefit, what is happening is phosphoric acid, which is a very important element in Indian agriculture, because we know Indian agriculture requires phosphatic chemicals, phosphatic fertilizers. And now, because it also sees its growing demand in the electric vehicles, therefore, the diversion of this chemical from agriculture to the manufacturing of electric vehicles and their batteries is a cause of worry for the Indian agriculture. This interrelated topic is something that we are going to wind up here. Next is mini moon. What is a mini moon? Is it exactly a moon or an asteroid who has been captured by the gravity of the earth, converted into a moon, is something that we are going to talk over here. Next is the Indian Institute of Immersive Creators. As we know, the creators economy is growing rampantly across the world. Taking advantage of this, we are also setting this up. Next is the Bio Ride scheme. Obviously, as the name suggests, it is to put an impetus towards the R&D and the technical applications of the biotechnology in India. Then what is Bharatiya Antariksh Station? Very important for the prelims 2025, because we know how many international stations are there operative in the space. In the low Earth orbit, only 2, ISS, and the second one is of China. The third, India is going to build. Very important highlight for this month. Next is the Global Cyber Security Index in India. What is the status of cyber security in India, the government initiatives, the challenge faced by Indians, and why we have improved as a tier 1 country at par with US, Japan, Australia, and UK in terms of cyber security. Okay, then we will see what is Project 200. This is developed by a private space agency, a private space company of India, right? Next is what are nano enzymes and how are they useful in keeping intact the content of collagen in the body. Then lastly, we will see the participation of women in the space sector, and we will also unwind what is the Women in Space Leadership Program, which is a joint venture between the Department of Science and Technology of India and that of ESA. So let's get started, and let me welcome you to unwind the first topic of this month, which is the acetanilide. So the first topic is about acetanilide. Now acetanilide is actually another name, antifebrin. And when I am saying this is antifebrin, which means it is also antipyretic, which means whenever one gets high temperature in body in the name of fever, that can be reduced with the help of acetanilide. In fact, do you know what is acetaminophen? Now, this is not something that you need to remember as such, but just to bring to your notice that these are the same salts which are used for same purposes. Acetaminophen is another name, the chemical name for the widely used paracetamols that we consume. Okay, so similarly, this also used to be an antipyretic, but because of looking at its hazardous impact on the people, because it could hamper the oxygen carrying capacity of blood. It could attach itself with the hemoglobin molecules of the blood. That is the reason why it was banned from to be taken directly into the body. Okay, so what are the features of acetanilide? The first thing is its structure. So as you can see, this is the structure of this gas. It is odorless. It is not having color, so it is colorless also. It is highly soluble in water. I will tell you why I am teaching you all of this. Okay, so these are some of the properties of this particular chemical. Now, this chemical is in news because of its gas leakage from a Visakhapatnam power plant. What was it doing in the Visakhapatnam power plant? So nowadays, since it is not being used in the terms of medicines, now it is repurposed to be used as a synthetic or a synthesizing element for creating rubbers or the artificial rubbers, or for creating some other industrial chemicals. Okay, so now it is a product which creates certain other industrial chemicals, for example, artificial rubber, etc. Okay, that is why it was being used in this power plant. Now, what happened? Because of the leakage, more than 5 people got affected by it. Why is it a hazardous gas? And when it comes to hazardous gas, what are the current running regulations in India to prevent such chemical leakages? Because this is not the first time. In fact, we should have completely avoided such incidences, especially learning after the Bhopal gas tragedy that we gained. So, this gas leakage was detrimental because it was a neurotoxic gas. What is a neurotoxic gas? A poisonous gas, a hazardous gas, which impacts the neurological system of the brain, which means it has the potential to either completely destroy the nerve system or could hamper the signal and processing system of the body. So the cognitive abilities would further be degraded upon consuming, inhaling, or getting exposed to such gases, even if in small quantities. And that is what happened in Visakhapatnam. This is a kind of typical chemical disaster. This is also happening. Why? Because we are facing certain challenges, which are certain structural challenges, which are not being taken care of from the governmental side, from our side, from the industry side. What are these challenges? We will look into that. But what are the other neurotoxic diseases? Because the first thing to prevent anything is to build its awareness. These are carbon dioxide. Yes, you will be very amazed to see that the basic gas of carbon dioxide, which is very prevalent in the atmosphere, if consumed or if we are exposed to it in larger quantity, could also come out to be neurotoxin in nature. Second is carbon monoxide, a typical gas which we know has got a higher affinity towards binding itself with a hemoglobin molecule. Why is hemoglobin important for us? Hemoglobin is responsible for attaching itself with the oxygen that we have consumed, and then with the help of blood it transports that oxygen throughout the body. So oxygen is very essential for our survival. We agree on this. Now, carbon monoxide has got a better affinity of getting attached. So it will replace the oxygen and attach itself with the hemoglobin molecule. So I hope we are able to appreciate this fact. Because of the enhanced affinities of these chemicals, they replace the oxygen. Instead of their formula, they attach themselves into the hemoglobin molecules. That is how they are able to make us oxygen deficient, and therefore in worst cases could lead to death. So one is this, then methane gas. Extreme exposure of methane gases is bad. Then methyl isocyanate, the gas which got leaked in Bhopal gas tragedy in the year 1984. On which day did it happen? We also celebrate it as a memorial day. So can you tell me on which day the Bhopal gas tragedy took place? And the next follow-up question for you is, are you able to recall any environmental legislation that came into fore from our learnings that we got from Bhopal gas tragedy? And this is the very important stalwart environmental legislation of India. So try to recall it, and if possible, try to comment that down so that I can see how many of you know this. Now, next one is acetanilide. So this is also neurotoxic gases. When I'm saying something is neurotoxic, it is not just something which can impact only the neural network of the body, the nervous system, but also has the capability of impacting the respiratory system and also impacting the other organs of the body, leading to organ failures. So what are the impacts on human? This is the next point. See, if anything is asked to you on chemical disasters. So how will you do? First of all, you will define what is chemical disasters according to NDMA definition. This is for disaster management course, so I'm not going to cover that. But the first thing is, what is the definition? Second is, let's say I'm talking about a particular gas disaster only. I'm talking about this gas disaster. Then you have to talk about the features of this gas. You have to also know the features of this gas with respect to prelims point of view. And then you have to tell me how does it impact humans. So what it will do, it will create anaerobic conditions, it will lead to breathing difficulty, oxygen deprivation, could also lead to irritation, because whenever any kind of sensory part or sensory organ gets exposed to it, it builds a burning sensation. So it can also bring irritation to the sensory organs of the body. Then it can effectively lead to central nervous system damage. Now, what are the previous instances of the neurotoxic gas leaks in India? This is also something that you need to quote in your mains answers. And you can also be given a question in the in the lines of match the column, that in this plant this disaster happened, or in this place this disaster happened, and this gas was leaked. Okay, so in lines of this, and you will be made to match the correct pair or pick the correctly matched pair. So first and foremost, we have the Union Carbide plant. Where is it located? It is located in Bhopal, and this gas tragedy was caused due to the leakage of methyl isocyanate. This question is very important, has been multiple times asked in the state PCS examinations and also once in the UPSC exam. Okay, second one, and the recent one of 2020 was a styrene gas leak. A styrene gas leak which has got a very similar formula. There also a benzene ring is there along with this pattern. This is the arrangement of a styrene gas. It caused death of many people in Visakhapatnam, and this happened in the plant of, so I have written styrene over here, it should have been written here. So this is styrene, and in LG polymer plant the leakage happened. Then the other ones are the leakages happening from landfills. Just imagine the industrial waste, the hazardous waste that were dumped in the landfills. That also caused these chemical disasters because of the release of hazardous gas. One such hazardous gas, to your disbelief, would be H2S. H2S is a very normal byproduct of also the human body. So this is having a very pungent odor, but when consumed in huge quantities, when getting exposed with it in huge quantities, it could turn out to be a neurotoxic gas. And this gas released from multiple landfills. So one such was the recent one of Ludhiana. The Ludhiana leak of industrial landfill, the Surat leak. So what happened? A landfill got burnt. It actually caught fire in Surat, and when it burnt, it released a lot of gases, including this gas, leading to death of many people. Okay, so these are some examples where we can quote how the landfills can also be one of the sources of chemical disasters. So I hope all of these headings are good to go. You are clear on that. You will be able to attempt them in the examination, both prelims and mains. Fine. Now let's move on to the next one. Now, when we know what are the implications of such gas leak, not just on human but also on the environment at large because of the landfill etc. event, we know that there is a dire need of having stringent preventive measures so that we do not see the deaths happening from the chemical disasters which are very much preventable. And we will also see what are the government regulations currently in place to take care of such disasters. So you knowing about these governmental regulations would be very helpful in prelims and mains. First and foremost is the environment regulation. Of course, these gas leakages, these chemical disasters have got a huge implication on the environment at large. They cause air pollution, water pollution, can kill off the biodiversities of both avian and the ocean ones, the water ones, and eventually can enter the food chain and harm the other spheres of biota as well. And therefore certain government regulations are there which focuses broadly on the environmental regulation. Those are, first of all, how to prevent and how to regulate and how to penalize the dumping of the hazardous waste or the hazardous chemicals into the two main spheres of environment, which is, tell me, air and water. So for air, what do we have? We have the Air Act. We have the Air Act of 1981, and we have got the Water Act. We have got the Water Act of 1974 and the all-encompassing Act of Environmental Protection Act passed in the year 1986. Right? So we have got certain environmental laws. If you try to pollute these spheres of environment, you will be penalized for that. So government has that in place. Now this one is a broader law. Let's move on to more discrete factors which are directly contributing to these gas leakages. One being hazardous waste, as we have told you. So there is a hazardous waste management protocol as well in the name of hazardous waste management, and that is hazardous waste management rules, prevention of transboundary movement, rules of 2016. So it also aims to penalize those who are found offending the hazardous waste, who are unsafely causing the storage, disposal or handling of the hazardous waste, because the hazardous waste could potentially create a neurotoxin which is hydrogen sulfide, H2S. Okay. Next is regulating the factories which are handling these hazardous chemicals is also very important. So there is a mandatory licensing which has to be complied by these factories which are handling such hazardous chemicals. This licensing has to be done under the Factory Act, of 1948. And then if at all some public liability has been caused because of the mismanagement, poor regulation or ignorance in the case or by the hands of these factories, then they should also be beforehand creating a public insurance, a kind of compensation that has to be given to the victims and their families beforehand. That insurance is covered under the Public Liability Insurance Act of 1991. So we also have taken compensatory regulations. Okay. Next is chemical accidents rules. So let's say what happens in the cases of emergency and how do we ensure that there are certain safety audits and certain safety regulations which are ensured by these industries who are operating or who are using the hazardous chemicals. There has to be certain rules. So we have already created chemical accident rules to be complied by these companies. It has been created in 1896, followed up by Bhopal gas tragedy, and also 1996 it got revamped. So there are two rules in function currently, and these basically ensure that there has to be an emergency response plan. So many times what happens, especially in the case of Bhopal gas tragedy, nobody could contemplate that the methyl isocyanate could turn out to be such a deadly and hazardous gas. And when it eventually started leaking, so people were not aware, first of all, and second, there was no emergency response plan. So the evacuation took a lot of time, claimed a lot of lives as well. Therefore, there has to be an emergency response plan. This is mandated by the government already. How much are we following it? How much are industries compliant to it? That is a talk for later words. But right now, we have these rules. We also have interventions by NDMA, the National Disaster Management Authority of India, because we know that CID or the chemical industrial disasters are also classified as very potent disasters in India. Especially, they gain more momentum and importance after the Bhopal gas tragedy. So NDMA has also put a very clear guideline as to how to ensure the guidelines for prevention of the chemical industrial disasters. Despite having all of this, despite having all of these regulations which seem to be multi-dimensional in its approach, multi-stakeholder in its approach, still we are lacking behind, and still some of the gas leakages are happening almost every year. One happened in Surat, then happened in Visakhapatnam, then happened in Ludhiana, and now again in Visakhapatnam, right? So it is continuously happening. So what could be the reason? Let's discover that. So the challenges lie in the key concept, which is of implementation, the lack of implementation, because we know that despite having all the regulations that are needed, we lack in implementation, and the devil lies in implementation always. So the challenges that we face, first of all, is of course regarding the implementation of the policies, implementation of the existing policies. But apart from that, there are other challenges. First is the lack of awareness. Not many of us know how many of these are the neurotoxin gases. That is why in the first slide, I've tried to build that awareness around you, that which of the gases could be neurotoxin in nature, so that you can be aware of it. Secondly, if there is, let's say, an industry working, then that industry also should publish in its let's say citizen charter that these are the particular chemicals which, if leaked in the environment, could cause deadly implications, right? So lack of awareness is one of the reasons why Bhopal gas tragedy claimed life of many people, because people were not aware that the gas that is getting leaked is a normal gas or is it a harmful deadly gas. Otherwise, they would have taken more promptive action. They were mostly sleeping. It was the time when the Bhopal gas tragedy happened, and the lack of awareness is the biggest killer of our society. Second, improper maintenance of the power plants, and this is of the industrial plants, and this is the owners, this is complete onus on the industry holder or the industry owner. So this was seen in the case of Visakhapatnam. Vishakhapatnam, where one of the refrigeration unit over there, it actually failed, and because of the poor surveillance and supervision, nobody was able to point out that this refrigeration unit is not working. Now styrene gas can only maintain its liquidity just like the nitrogen gas and the ammonia gas, only under highly refrigerated condition. Otherwise it gets converted into gaseous form and starts releasing, right? So, and because the diffusion rate is so high, it got exposed into the atmosphere, and this happened because of improper maintenance of the current infrastructure, right? Next is the rapid urbanization. See, always remember, this is a hazard. Leakage of gases is a hazard. It obviously happens a lot from the volcanic eruption also. A hazard can only turn into disaster when it gets exposed to human lives, or when it starts claiming the human life or affecting the humans in general, or the life in general, be it man, animal, or our other parts of biodiversity. The fact that it is turning into hazard is because of the growing urbanization. See, in the case of Vishakhapatnam facility only, Vishakhapatnam facility, through which the styrene gas leaked, was initially located in a very small village of Gopalpatnam. Okay, now this Gopalpatnam was initially a deserted area, a secluded area. Eventually it got converted, it got urbanized, and therefore when this gas leakage happened, it claimed a lot of lives over there. The reason for this is rapid urbanization, because the determination of the location of a chemical industry is very important. It has to be kept little away from the highly urbanized colonies, and this is again something which is lacking in our current environmental regulations, which government can take into regard. Second is the improper waste disposal. Now think about this. Why in Ludhiana people got killed because of a gas leakage happening from a manhole? Or why in Surat the same thing happened because of a landfill? Why? Because the degradation of the waste itself is a very highly active chemical process, could lead into a lot of hazardous gas in the environment. The most essential ones, carbon dioxide, classic ones, carbon monoxide, H2S gas, methane gas, this all happens. Why? Because of improper waste management. And this gets worsened up when this waste management or this waste is of industrial nature or of biochemical nature. Then in that regards, improper waste disposal could be a reason. This is a classic example of the Surat landfill or Ludhiana manhole case. Okay. Next is lack of emergency preparedness. So what happens in most of the condition, because we are lacking the awareness, many a times the regulatory authority, the industry itself also lacks the awareness about the potency or the harmfulness of that particular gas. Now, this is the reason why we also, even though in that previous slide we have seen that government has made regulation that we should be having emergency response, but are we formulating it? No. That can be seen how we are prepared for it. It was seen in the case of Kochi. In the case of Kochi, landfill burning case. So the landfill caught the fire instantly, and this led to evacuation of a lot of people. And not only that, they were just thinking that this landfill is only burning, it is not going to harm us, but it led to evaporation of certain gases in the atmosphere, which caused 11 deaths over there. So burning of landfill, immediately acknowledging the fact that if it is getting dumped by certain industrial gases, then it could be detrimental for our health as well. So we have to immediately evacuate from that place. This is an emergency response which is to be created by government for all the industries managing hazardous waste. Next is issues with India legal framework. We've got a very broad framework, but what is happening? Is it seeing the light of the day? I don't think so. Secondly, there is poor implementation. Third, there is lack of supervision. Fourth, the laws are very outdated. Secondly, because there are so many acts, there is also duplication of the same things over and over again. So there is also a confusion among the authorities as to what act to invoke and which is the authority to take care of it. This leads to confusion in assuming responsibility. This happened in the case of Bhopal gas tragedy. The company was blaming government was blaming the company. Okay, next. Non-transparent operations of the industries. Many a times they don't reveal, as I've told you, that they should be revealing it very clearly as to which gas would be hazardous if leaked. This is also a very big problem, and this leads to creation of a vicious cycle. Because they do this, we are not aware. Because we are not aware, we are not able to take the emergency response. So everything is interrelated. Now when you understand the challenges, then how can we improve it? By improving all these challenges itself. So what should be the solution? See, now students always remember one tip. that once you know about the challenges, way forward will be nothing but the improvement on these challenges only. So first one would be building the awareness by building transparency. Building awareness by building transparency. And what transparency are we going to build here? Transparency about the operations of the industries and about the emergency plans. So we are obtaining our way forward from the challenges itself. Second, to ensure proper supervision and maintenance of the industries which could be handling these hazardous chemicals. Second is to ensure in the guidelines proper location or relocation of such industries so that they are away from the highly populated areas. Okay. Next is we should also ensure that there is proper waste management in lines with our waste management policies. Then, and the penalties of waste management or improper waste management should also be made more stricter from the side of government. Okay. Then not only that, when we are talking about the safety, I know that there could be emergency conditions. So not just having emergency preparedness helps or emergency response action helps. What also helps is ensuring the safety of the workers, safety of the people living in the surrounding areas. So both of them should be ensured. And a plan for their quick evacuation should also be one of the elements of the company's safety policy. Next is India's legal framework needs to be revamped and needs to be created in a more comprehensive fashion, which means we need to create a national unified guideline for the prevention of chemical industrial disasters and also for the compensation of the same. So we need a single plan. We need a single plan that can be utilized on a national level. So we need a national plan for this. Okay. And then of course, we have to put certain obligations and stricter ones to ensure the transparent disclosure of the operations and of the chemical used by the companies. Now the second topic is about a very deadly fungus which has infected not humans but the ants, especially the carpenter ants, and what we also call it tarantulas. What is the context behind this news is wildlife researchers have recently found some of the tarantulas to be getting infected by zombie fungus, which could be a very big threat on their population, on their diversity. So see, zombie fungus, as we know that fungus is a kind of eukaryotic organism which reproduces through spores. Okay. Now these fungus could be both beneficial and could be predative also, could be predatory as well, which means certain fungus that which builds upon the bread, if you're not consuming it, or if it's a rotten bread or a rotten apple, these kind of funguses gets built up. These are bad in nature. But there are certain good kind of fungus as well. For example, yeast, which helps us to create cakes because it helps in fermentation. Also certain mushrooms, all the mushrooms are actually a form of fungus only. In this particular case, we are going to see a kind of environmental relation where the relation is of predation. We know that there is a symbiotic relationship, commensalism, and also this time predation. So here we will see how predation happens. Okay, so how predation happens, that this infects ants, especially the tarantulas. Now you may ask, ma'am, are tarantulas present in India or not? For the matter of fact, please remember, tarantular ant species, intervertebrates, which are present in all the continents of the world except for Antarctica. So in India, of course, we've got tarantulas and many varieties of it, especially prevalent in the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats of India. Some of them are also endemic to India. Now, these tarantulas get infected by this fungus, and eventually this fungus deteriorates their cognitive ability, their nervous system, their motor system, therefore hampering their movement. It also sucks up the entire nutrient that is taken up by this tarantula. So it also leads to nutritional death. It also because of starvation. So these are some of the impacts or implications of this tarantula growing or getting impacted by this fungus. Therefore, this fungus is known as zombie fungus. The other reason for this is, see, zombies always appear high on drugs, always appear to be very, very hungry because they require a lot of food, and that food is not actually required by their body, but by certain other infections that have gotten built into their bodies. That is why they're very hungry for food. Similarly, these ants which are infected by such funguses get very, very hungry, and eventually they climb to the spots where the humidity and temperature are very conducive for the growth of the fungus. Why does this happen? Because this fungus attacks their mind, and it tells their mind to go on a region where this fungus could reproduce itself in large number. So they enter into such areas. This ant then crawls onto the stem or to that side of the areas where it won't fall but is able to consume a lot of food. This food eventually grows not the ant but the fungus, and the moment fungus sporadically grows inside the body, it eventually leads to the death of this ant. So it's not a very important topic from UPSC point of view as such, but reading about tarantulas, especially the carpenter ants, you might also ask, ma'am, does it impact animals or does it impact human in general? No, it only impacts the intervertebrates. What are intervertebrates? Can we give certain examples? Of course, ants are examples and spiders are examples. So it primarily infects them only. Okay, why is it called zombie? We have understood that as well. And now moving on to the next topic. Now students, for the first time ever, India has created an EMF, which is Enzyme Manufacturing Facility. This is to boost the production of enzymes. But what are we needing enzymes for? We are needing these chemical substances to break down the sugar, specifically the sugar that is coming from rice stubble. Please remember everything very carefully. From rice stubble, and to break that sugar down into ethanol, because what are we vouching for currently? A conversion from fossil fuel based economy towards a more greener economy, and that would be done with the help of blending these fossil fuels, let's say petrol, with ethanol. So what are we vouching for? Creation of biofuels. So to put an impetus to the production of biofuels, we would require certain accelerator chemicals. These chemicals are known as enzymes. So this facility has been set up for the first time in India in Manesar, Haryana. Why have we chosen this particular place only? Why have we chosen this place? Because we know that stubble burning is one of the most, and its management is one of the most prominent problems of the green revolution belt of India, which is Punjab and Haryana. So therefore, we have chosen a location of Haryana so that we can take care of two things. First of all, how to lessen up the pollution that is generally the main cause of air pollution that is visible in the areas of Delhi NCR and the other parts of Punjab and Haryana, to how to deal with the air pollution. Air pollution caused due to the stubble burning, and that too the primary stubble burning of rice. And then how to ensure a circular economy. Circular economy as in how can we utilize the waste, or how can we quickly remove the stubble, and how can we create it into another useful product which could help us create more biofuels for the country. So therefore, it will help us in circular economy, and it will help us in creating, of course, a biofuel which is bioethanol. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to convert the rice stubble into bioethanol. But then, ma'am, why are we using enzyme facility? Why have we manufactured this? Because what happens is, India is highly reliant on the imports of the enzymes from the rest part of the world, because we do not have sufficient amount of production of this enzyme. Now, as we are trying to move towards a more greener economy, we would require certain elements, certain chemicals, which could create or which could facilitate the creation of these biofuels. How are biofuels created, specifically bioethanol? Bioethanol is created by breaking down of sugar. If I break down this sugar, a complex carbohydrate. Now, carbohydrate is present in your wheat crop, in also the stacks of the wheat, in the sugar, in your rice, in your wheat, in your sugars, in your sugar cane, in your fruits. Everywhere there is carbohydrate. We in our body also have got carbohydrate. So the carbohydrate, which is a very complex molecule, it gets broken down, and when it is fermented, the fermentation causes the creation of bioethanol. So essentially, to simply tell you, what is bioethanol? It is nothing but a fermented sugar. In fact, talking about the potency of its purity, it is 99.9% of bioethanol that we use in India for the blending purposes, because you already know that India is taking up the bioethanol blending program, and in which we are targeting that there should be 10% blending of the petrol with the bioethanol of this much purity. But recently, in the G20 Energy Ministers Summit of 2023, Prime Minister has said that we will start rolling out a 20% blending of the bioethanol. So which means if I want to do the 20% blending, I would be requiring more production of bioethanol. To produce a bioethanol, I don't want to be import dependent on other countries to provide me this enzyme. What an enzyme does. So what generally happens if you feel that you have a bad stomach? Your father will tell you immediately, beta, please drink a digestive enzyme. Why are we drinking the digestive enzyme? Because it will accelerate the process of digestion. It is doing nothing but just accelerating the chemical reaction. So that is why enzymes are the biocatalyst. Catalysts are any substances which themselves do not take part in the reaction, but what they only cause is acceleration of the chemical reaction, so that the degradation of the molecule, the digestion of the molecule takes place quickly, okay, and more efficiently. So we know that broadly we eat food which either has starch, or it has protein, or it has fat. Now if I want to create bioethanol, it can only be created with the help of starches, okay. What enzyme is used to break down the starch in body? It is amylase. So your digestive syrups would be having certain name like this only. Next is proteins. Proteins gets broken by protease. Fat gets broken into lipase. Why? Because fats, if broken down into their micro unit, the smallest units are the lipids, and even smaller ones are the fatty acids. So the basic unit of fat molecule is a fatty acid or the lipids. The basic unit of a protein is what? It is peptides, and which gets further degraded into amino acids. The basic unit of starch is nothing but a carbohydrate. So the basic unit of starch is glucose. So I hope we are able to understand this, right? So let's quickly summarize what all we have read in this slide. We have read what are enzymes. Enzymes help us in breaking down of complex proteins, complex molecules, for example, starch or carbohydrate. Carbohydrate or starch is something which produces bioalcohol or biofuel for us. We are looking out for bioethanol. Why? Because we are aiming to blend it up to 20% into our fuel, to make our fuels more environmental friendly, to make us lesser import dependence on the fossil fuels from the Western nations or the Middle East nations, right? So in order to make ourselves self-sufficient, we need to develop bioethanols. To make the economy and the energy system more greener, we need to create bioethanol. Therefore, because there is a huge demand, we need to create a facility which could accelerate the creation of bioethanol, and that too from which kind of molecule or which kind of product? From the rice stubble, because stubble burning is a problem in Haryana and Punjab, which impacts the air pollution of Delhi NCR. Correct? Now, move on to next topic. Here we will quickly read about the ethanol economy in India. So we've already learned what is ethanol. Can I tell you the chemical formula of this as well? Since it is ethanol, which means it has got two molecules of carbon. So this is carbon along with one ethanol, which means one alcohol. So OH hydroxyl group, okay, and with all the other sides are covered with hydrogen. Okay, so this is chemical formula C2H5OH. Okay, this is ethanol economy. So when I'm trying to blend it with the petrol, what I'm doing is I'm trying to bring a mixture of 10:90. 90 parts of petrol, 10 parts of ethanol. Why can't I use ethanol 100%? Well, I can use, but currently we do not have the technology because it is so combustible. It is so highly combustible that if you use ethanol in its 99.9% potency, then it will blast off the vehicle. Therefore, because we do not have current technologies developed for it, we are trying to we are trying to create a mixture like this. But what is the target? What is the futuristic target of India? Currently, as promised by Prime Minister, 20:80 target is there, and by 2025, we have to achieve a blending of 25:75. How to do it? By boosting the ethanol production in India. So to boost the ethanol production, first of all, let's look into the current status. Why India requires this much ethanol is because we are the third energy market of the world. Third in the world, which is having such a great amount of energy demand, and with the growing population, we have also surpassed China in terms of population. We're going to have this more energy demand, right? So in that case, please remember, we are third in the world when it comes to energy market, energy demand. Okay. Secondly, when it comes to status of ethanol production, because we've been eyeing for more greener form of biofuels, more greener form of fuels, which could also guard us from the heavy dependence of other countries, from other countries for importing the fossil fuels, because we are not self-sufficient in building fossil fuel. We are trying to move towards a more greener economy, biofuel-based economy. Now that biofuel could be of multiple types, but what we are targeting here is the ethanol. So in the terms of ethanol, it has grown up to 6 times. The production of ethanol due to government interventions has been grown up to 6 times in the last 8 years. And you know how much is it expected to grow? It is expected to grow 500% by 2025. This is the targeted year. Okay. You must also be curious about the fact that, ma'am, from where we are creating ethanol? If I want to create the production, if I want to enhance the production, what is required first? Setting up of production facilities, setting up of catalyst or enzymatic facilities. Third is to have the source in sufficient quantity so that I can create ethanol more rapidly. So what are the sources currently preferred by India? Please remember, whenever we talk about biofuels, we have divided them into first generation, second generation and third generation biofuel, depending upon which can be most readily used for biofuel conversion. Why? Because we cannot compromise with the food security. The best form of biofuel could come, let's say, from potato. But can we use all the potatoes to create the fuel? No. This will have a conflict with the food security of the country. Therefore, while we cannot use rice and wheat, etc., but what government has used so far is the surplus rice. Surplus rice from FCI godowns. Broken rice or broken grains are also used. They can also be used. These are first generation biofuels only. Then they also use byproducts of sugarcane, which is B molasses, C molasses, C molasses. They also use sugar syrups or certain kind of non-food crops. They also use maize in many a times. But if somebody asks you that which is the major source of ethanol in India, that is B molasses. That statement could be asked, and here is the answer. Okay, so we have understood the status of ethanol production in India. I hope it is clear to you. Now, what are the advantages of using an ethanol based fuel, or what is the advantage of converting into an ethanol economy, and what are the challenges regarding the same? So first, if you see into it, it provides us security from a lot of sides: agricultural security, energy security, employment stability and security. How? Let's look into it. First and foremost, energy security. Currently, India is dependent on up to 80% on the fossil fuels. For example, coal, for example, petroleum, natural gases, all of them which are non-renewable in nature, which means these are non-sustainable sources. If I use all of them, then what my future generations will be able to use? Nothing. So their energy security would be compromised, and maybe in some time, because I have depleted the oil reserves, might be possible that I will also be deprived of my energy security. Energy is the key to build and to grow and develop the life. Therefore, it provides us energy security. It would provide us energy security because where are we creating this ethanol from? From the very basic carbohydrates that are readily available in my environment and which can be replenished very quickly, at least more quickly as compared to replenishing the fossil fuels, which would take decades, which would take millions of years, correct? So therefore, it provides me energy security in terms of sustainability of production. Second, energy security in the terms of saving my economy from the import bill. So it will definitely reduce my import bill. I'm not saying that I'm not going to buy the petrol or the fossil fuels. Of course, I don't have enough technology to completely convert from a fossil fuel based economy to biofuel based economy, but I'm doing the blending. So previously, when I used to purchase 50 liters from you, now I will only be purchasing 30 liters from you, which means I'm cutting down on my import bill, which means I'm strengthening my forex reserves also and my economy. Next is securing the farmer's income. Ashok Dalwai, who also vouched for creating a rainbow revolution, said that we should try to diversify the farmer's income if we want to double it up or even triple it up. Now, how to diversify it? To ensure that, let's say, when a farmer is raising rice on his land, then this rice stubble can also be used for something. It can be used for creating bioethanol, as we have seen. Farmers' rice grains, if they have not made their way to the godowns, not made their way to the market, then instead of throwing it away, they can again utilize it for the bioethanol production. This is helping farmer or not? So therefore, this is how farmers' income will also enhance, and this will also enhance the agricultural income of the nation. This will enhance the agricultural productivity per hectare. Okay, next is employment generation. If I'm setting up manufacturing facilities, then what it means, I'm going to employ more manpower into it, which means providing more employment generation, which is a need of the demand for India, which is getting marred by the unemployment explosion in the country, right? Next is sustainability. This fuel is going to be more sustainable as compared to the conventional fuels that we are using, because when I'm using it, I will not be afraid that my future generations would be compromised of it, because no, even they can, in fact, by creating more technologies like building, third generation biofuel, for example, creating certain algae or fungi which could be decomposed into bioethanol, I can ensure them, promise my future generation that you will also be having the biofuels in future. So this is the more sustainable form of fuel. Second is, it can help us to fuel the India. How were we able to feed the India? By cultivating green revolution. Now we can also build a biofuel revolution, especially by the drought prone areas which are just growing millets or which are growing rice, maize, etc. These crops, specifically the non-food crops, we can make them rich and affluent as well, by making them the centers of fueling the India by providing products for bioethanol. This is very famous in the case of Vidarbha region of Maharashtra, which provides sugarcane. Okay, next is the bioproducts of bioethanol, interestingly, is also very useful. Do you know it creates potash? And you know what is potash used for? A very prominent fertilizer. So it can also create circular economy. So therefore, these are the benefits of using or converting into a ethanol economy. Now, every new innovation has got its own share of benefits and challenges. Now, let's look into the challenges, shall we? First of all, and the technical challenge that we face is of ethanol having a very low energy content. See, what happens is, when a fuel burns, it has to give off a certain amount of energy so that it can drive off the vehicle. Is it possible for us to blend the ethanol up to 50%? No, because it will not provide enough mileage to the vehicle. Why? Because the energy content of ethanol is less than 40%. It is less than 40%. Energy content of a fossil fuel like petrol is more than 70%. Just compare it. I cannot entirely replace the petrol or fossil fuel based fuel from ethanol. Why? Because it will drastically reduce the mileage of my vehicle. I hope you are able to appreciate this fact. So this is the technical constraint that we face with respect to ethanol. The second thing is, ethanol having a very high affinity towards the water. So if in your petrol tank, if there's a minor chance of water entering up, the entire ethanol will mix up with the water and lose its blending with the petrol. Blending of ethanol with the petrol, therefore, is a very challenging technical task. And if at all it gets exposed with water vapors, or if water enters into the petrol tank, then that will cause engine stalling, which means engine will stop working. So it should be made waterproof in case of ethanol blended vehicles. Next is It also is impacted by climate change and unavailability of sufficient feedstock. Currently, India cannot use the existing food grains because it could come in compromise with the food security of the country. What do we have? We have the ruined grains, or we have got the surplus grains from the FCI. The thing with grains is that it produces more amount of bioethanol as compared to other sources. For example, molasses, etc. So, first of all, we have insufficient feedstock. This challenge could be removed by doing more R&D and producing products and cultivating those products which can give us high amount of carbohydrate or starch content, which not only just secures our food security but also ensures that we are producing ethanol in sufficient quantity from it. So for that, R&D is required, production of third generation biofuel is required, certain algae fungi could be created in this regard. Next challenge is faced by the climate change. Now that the kind of crops that are required to be grown, for example sugarcane, which is producing molasses, its availability would be severely affected by droughts, floods and other climate change driven events. So think about this, the more we are getting climate change, the more adversity is faced by the crops, especially the crops which are rich in starch content, for example rice and sugarcane. Think about it. Therefore, the feedstock would further get depleted if we do not create the third generation biofuels here. Next one is the regional disparity. So if you talk about the entire map of India, you know what is the distribution of sugarcane. UP produces a lot of it, Bihar produces a lot of it, the Maharashtra region produces a lot of it, there's Tamil Nadu as well. These are the primary 4 to 5 states which produces surplus of bioethanol. Now this much bioethanol is not even utilized by them, and there are other drought regions, not drought region as such of lack of water or food, but drought in the terms of biofuel availability. Such regions, for example, are Jammu Kashmir. So we need to create an interconnected pipeline so that the regions which are having floods or good amount of very surplus amounts of biofuel can be connected with the biofuel desert regions of India so that we can have a regional parity. Okay. Now let's quickly look into a very important aspect for means, which is what are the steps taken by Government of India to promote ethanol blending. So first thing is the arrangement of raw material, right? So for the arrangement of raw material, there is a dedicated nodal department. So government has given all the responsibility in their hand. You go to the FCI go downs and take up the surplus maize and rice from them. You go to the sugar mills and collect the sugarcane produced from them. So the nodal agency has been defined very clearly so that a centralized operation happens. Centralized procurement of the raw material happens. Second thing is ethanol procurement. Government ensures that all the surplus produce of this the carbohydrate grains or the surplus produce of sugarcane is directly procured by the government in case it is not procured by any ethanol blending or ethanol manufacturing facility. So the surplus of it is actually procured by the government itself. That is another governmental intervention. So till now what we have ensured is that enough availability of raw material is there with the government so that we can give it to the industries which can produce ethanol. Fine. Next one is how to give targets to the economy. So for the energy economy, for the petrol economy, we have said that we have got a 2003 policy to encourage blending of ethanol in the petrol. It all started with target of blending 5%, that has been achieved, 10% achieved, 20% is something that is rolling out gradually. Eventually, we'll be having target of blending 25% up to by 2025. Fine. So we have got targets for the petrol, for the fuel economy of the country that government has given, launched in 2003. Next is national policy on biofuels to strategize a policy, to create a multi-stakeholder policy to ensure the production and generation of more number of biofuels and eventually shift from first generation to second generation to third generation biofuel in the country. Okay, next is providing differential pricing. Now, how to incentivize somebody, how to ensure that farmers' income is doubling up. This is with the help of incentivizing them for production of raw materials in enough quantities so that good quantity of ethanol can be created. This is done in the case of sugar mills. So for the sugar mills, government provides more amount of money for procuring B molasses, C molasses and sugarcane syrups, especially for those farmers who are going under losses for not producing enough amount of sugar from these molasses. Okay, so this byproduct of sugarcane that can be purchased in higher, or that can be purchased for a higher amount. Okay, so government would be paying more for providing them B molasses. Differential pricing is there. Second is the GST is also one of the impediments. So the higher GST erstwhile of 18% has been reduced up to 5%. So only 5% of GST has to be paid for what? For not ethanol, for an ethanol blended petrol. Okay, next is supporting the industries and the sugar mills by waiving off some of the interest or sharing off some of the interest that they have taken or they have to bear in the form of loans that they have taken. So government provides for interest subvention scheme and has also created a roadmap, entire roadmap, like we saw the roadmap and the necessity of the same for dealing with the chemical industrial disaster. Similarly, for ethanol blending in India, there's an entire roadmap. We've got targets and we'll be approaching on a phased manner. Now, how can we further provide an impetus to the already growing economy, ethanol economy of India? First and foremost is feedstock diversification. See, what happens is there's more amount of energy, more amount of ethanol which can be obtained from grains, food grains, as compared to from B molasses. In the first slide, we read that majority of the ethanol is getting produced from B molasses only, which is a byproduct of sugarcane industry. Now, what is the need of the hour? To enhance the efficiency of ethanol production, we would be requiring more amount of food grains. Of course, it could compromise with food security. There comes a need of creating specialized crops, high yielding technically or genetically modified crops, which could not be used for the food purposes, but only for the production of ethanol. So feedstock diversification is required. This can be done with the help of certain R&D, technological interventions, by creating these new genetically modified crops, or by policy intervention, so that the government allows us to use the other food grains which might be wasted, or the food that we eat, if it is getting wasted, maybe that can be utilized to create ethanol also. Fine. So policy measures and technical measures, technological measures and policy measures are needed. Second is to augment the ethanol production capacity, because we know that there are certain regions which produces surplus amount of ethanol even beyond their requirement, and there are certain others which have got no signs of ethanol at all. So there needs to be augmented ethanol capacity. How can we do? In the Himalayan states, set up that facility. Northeastern states, set up that capacity, right? So there should be a balancing out approach when it comes to setting the industries. Infrastructure creation is also required and also to be handled by the government. The reason for this is, when I'm creating that much amount of ethanol, it should be having certain storage facilities, right? Certain infrastructure for maintaining the temperature, right temperature. So all of that kind of infrastructure, support infrastructure as we say, that would be needed. So government should provide enough funds to support the infrastructure development, especially the infrastructure regarding the maintenance or the auxiliary infrastructures which are required for storage and maintenance. Next is, see, what happens is, when formulating any policies at that of that level to achieve that kind of a target, we would require elimination of bureaucratization or red tapeism. Therefore, single window clearances for the government procurement is needed. So just like how we have ENAM, the National Agriculture Market. Similarly, we should be having one dedicated market or portal for providing single window clearances for procurement of ethanol by the industries for the farmers, from the farmers directly, or by the government from the farmers or industries. Correct? Last but not the least, creating ethanol compatible vehicles. Think about it. If the vehicles are not able to lose the mileage despite having a highly blended ethanol, that would actually create a greener economy for us. Now, the need of the hour is to create such vehicles, and if we already have such vehicles, it's the job of government to incentivize us to purchase these vehicles. How? By subsidizing their rates. Okay, this is how we will be able to transform ourselves into an ethanol economy, a much greener economy, for a much sustainable future. Okay, moving on to the next topic. So students, our next topic is a new innovations that is being used to create more cost-effective medicines, that is by repurposing the existing medication for the other therapeutic purposes. This is known as drug repurposing method. Let me give you an example for this to understand the context better. So have you heard about aspirin? So aspirin is a tablet which initially was used as an analgesic, which means it's a pain reliever. And now you must have heard that if somebody is suffering from immediate heart stroke or anything related to breathing issue or heart issue, then they are immediately delivered this aspirin. Why? Because of its other therapeutic effects apart from being an analgesic, which is that it prevents blood clotting, it prevents the development of a lot of platelet, therefore it helps in restricting the clogging of the veins and the arteries and thus prevents heart attacks in certain cases. The same medicine is now getting used for multiple purposes. This is known as drug repurposing. And why is it gaining? Also, this is known as drug reprofiling. Drug reprofiling, or also known as repositioning. Fine. Now, this has been in news recently because an Indian team has repurposed an antidepressant drug which can be now utilized for cancer treatment. You would have already heard about how typical and complex and costly the cancer treatment could become. But what could be better than utilizing the existing medication for cancer treatment? For that, of course, we need to check whether the clinical trials are getting approved in this case or not, but in most of the cases, since their efficacy is better than the newly developed medicines, therefore the repurposed drugs or the repurposed medicines are often chosen as the first resort towards preventing a lot of diseases. For example, COVID. So during COVID-19, there was a drug, remdesivir. You must have heard of it. Remdesivir initially was not created to cure corona or COVID, but to cure Ebola. But since all of them were evolving from the same family of virus, SARS corona, that is why it was effective in helping us fight against the COVID-19 disease also. Also, because COVID-19 was a very new disease for the world, so we were not very prepared beforehand. A lot of clinical or drug trials were going on. In fact, the new drug creation itself takes an average of 10 to 12 years of time. And this is in the case of US. Think about India. So had it not been in the case of the vaccines and the remdesivir, the existing remdesivir, we would have not been able to reduce the fatality of COVID. That is the importance of drug repurposing. So it is not only cost effective because I'm only utilizing the previously created drug for new therapeutic purposes, but at the same time it is having more efficacy because it is more tried and tested. And thirdly, not only is it cost effective, but it is also time and resource effective. Why? Because the entire time taken to develop a particular drug gets drastically reduced when I'm trying to repurpose something. These are some of the uses, some of the significances. Let's talk about more of them from mains point of view. So we have got two examples of the drugs, if at all it's asked. It's remdesivir. It's of course aspirin. Okay, these are two classic drugs, and this particular FDA approved drug, which is getting used for treating the oral cancers now. Okay, and the name of this drug is highlighted. It's not very important, but if you just want to know the name for the sake of quoting, it's Pirvenium pamoate. Okay, so it is going to be repurposed for the usage of oral cancer treatment. Okay, now let's further from the mains point of view, we'll move on to the other topics. So here we have got certain advantages, we have got certain challenges. First of all, what are the challenges and what are the advantages? So now let's look into the advantages and the disadvantages of drug repurposing, starting with the advantage. First and foremost, see what it does. It is a faster, which means it is time effective, and it is less expensive, which means it is a cost effective process. Because what generally happens when a drug has to be created for a targeted treatment, first of all, what happens is the drug discovery. This is the first stage. Then comes the trial stage, in which there are pre-clinical trials, which means trials which are made on the animals, specifically mice. Then there are the clinical trials which are done on the patients, human patients against that particular disease or suffering from that particular disease, and then it goes for the IP, intellectual property right registration. So then the intellectual property right registration happens, and then finally it gets the drug approval. Now, how is it cost effective, ma'am? Because this entire life cycle would span up to 10 to 12 years of time. But let's say we got, God forbid, some X disease or pandemic X as they imagine nowadays. In that case, do we have time of 10 to 12 years to develop another medicine? That is what is very much required, that whenever we are creating new drugs, we should elaborate and create more extensive researches on the existing drugs itself, so as to know that they can be repurposed for what all causes. This will make the process very time effective. When I'm creating a repurposed drug, I only have to do the clinical trial because they have already been conducted successfully till preclinical trials, that is till animal testing. Next is, in the clinical trials, I have to check whether it is effective against the other therapeutic use that I'm intending to do. What about the IP registration, and does it get the drug approval from the respective authority or not? So it's all about it. So basically, it is faster, it is less expensive. Second, it has got a higher success rate. Higher success rate, what happens is, because this particular drug has already cleared all the stages till preclinical stage. So therefore, its effectiveness is found to be 30% times more. 30% times more as compared to newly created drug for that therapeutic purpose. In the case of newly created drug, the efficacy is only of up to 10%. So which means there is a 90% rejection rate in the new drugs that we are making. So therefore this data makes us understand that it is even more cost effective. Okay, next is treatment of rare diseases. Rare diseases are those which are so rarely found and not well researched of that we lack, despite advancing so much into the medical sciences, we lack the proper treatment from them. So if we are able to broaden our horizon and see how many therapeutic uses could be derived from an existing medicine, we might also find a potential way as to how those can be used for treating rare diseases as well. Can you name at least 3 rare diseases for me in the comment section? Because rare diseases is also something that India is now looking into its policy making, and which mission actually targets the treatment, the identification and prevention of rare diseases in India? That's a question for you. Please try to answer that. Now, the ROI, the return on investment, is also high for the pharmaceutical companies. Why? A pharmaceutical company has already created, let's say, crocin. Okay, now the pharmaceutical company knows that this crocin is also good for the skin. So now the same crocin tablet is now getting directed or marketed for multiple areas of usages, which means create one medicine and treat multiple diseases or ailments. This is remunerative because it boosts the collection, it boosts the revenue for the pharmaceutical companies. Next, rapid response to health emergency, because during the health emergencies, if we already could repurpose an existing drug, that would be a better option as compared to taking all this long time to create a new drug. Okay, this happened in the case of, if you have to write this, justify this point, what will you say? You will write about COVID-19 and the use of remdesivir. Next is reduced need of animal testing, because it has already cleared the stage till preclinical trials. So there is no need, in fact, reduced need of animal testing, which could also amount to animal cruelty. Okay, but again, it also is marred by some of the challenges which we need to take care of. See, so the first challenge involves that of having the technical issues. Technical issues means looking into the technicality of the efficacy. That can only be ensured when the amount of data that has been collected out of this enormous R&D that would have done in this upon this particular medicine, that needs to be properly assessed. So data analytics is very important, data accuracy is very important. Then trying to do the clinical trials over diversity of the population, that is also very important. Okay, so we need to take care of the technical issues which might come across. Second is the efficacy and the safety. In many cases, It might be effective towards one disease, but it could also create certain consequences in the body. This was seen actually in the case of a lot of COVID-19 vaccines, which eventually caused high blood pressures in human body, caused multiple psychological disorders like anxiety disorder in human body. This was one of the side effects of this. Similarly, it could be there in the case of a repurposed drug as well. So efficacy could be a question to ponder about. Next is the intellectual property right and the timing. So gaining this for any pharmaceutical industry anyways take time. So this also would be more time taking if it is contested too much among various companies. Okay, so this is about drug purposing. Now next topic is that a mission, basically a spacecraft of NASA with the name of Endurance. So what is happening? Endurance, which is a spacecraft of which space agency? NASA, has recently discovered a very unique mystery that has recently been solved. So this was about how we have got a third energy field. So what are the two existing energy fields, ma'am? One is the magnetic field that we have around the Earth, because Earth is nothing but a rotating dynamo, naturally would be creating magnetic field around it. Along with it, we also have got a very strong gravitational field which keeps everything together. But then what is the reason that something is able to keep the skies at their places? Or since 1960s, we have been wondering, because some of the spacecraft, when they actually went to the polar regions now and the polar atmosphere, they realized, specifically in the ionosphere, that some particles are shooting upwards towards the space more at the speed of light. So they used to wonder that what exactly is causing it. Is it the gravitational pull of the sun? But had it been the case, it would have happened uniformly across all the areas of the Earth. So finally that mystery, the theoretical induction that we might be having an electric field around the Earth has been finally declared true by Endurance. So this is a very important news. Now where is it located? This field is also known as the polar winds, because if you go to the north and the south poles, you will see some of the charged particles spriting upwards in the space at very high direction. What are they defying? They are defying the gravitational pull, right? And they move away into the space in both north direction and south direction, just like winds. You already have heard about the solar winds. Similarly, the polar winds are there. Why? Because they are originating from the poles, but not of the sun, of Earth only. So these are known as the weak electric fields of the Earth. Fine.